Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Tomashi. Welcome to the final gathering of the Brown 2 Book Club, where we get together to read and discuss Brown 2, originally published in 2021 by the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study and reprinted in 2022 by the Boston Ujima Project as a part of this Ashe Ashe Cultural Assembly grant. We read together from 1,000-word transcriptions of 2020 interviews with discussant contributors Matt Cregor, Tomiko Brown-Nagin, David J. Harris, Donna Bivens, Nia K. Evans, Rashida Richardson, Meredith Whitaker, and Sabelo Sethu Mlambi. During the COVID-19 public health crisis lockdown of 2020, I worked with an extraordinary team of research assistants at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study to use Zoom to ask questions about education advocacy histories before and after the Brown v. Board of Education II Supreme Court decision of 1955. This case had to do with implementing desegregation of public schools with, quote, all deliberate speed. We worked together in physical isolation, transcribing the conversations to make a book. Ours was the only project to continue at the Institute during this unprecedented time. We asked, how do we make an exhibition available to the public when we cannot all gather together in the same place? The publication was our way. When the book was published, members of the general public and the Harvard community at large were invited to request copies that were each sent by mail from the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study. When Harvard campus reopened, visitors of the Brown 2 exhibition and the Kulukundis Family Gallery received copies of the book in person. Nearly 1,000 copies were given out in 2021. Now, the Boston Ujima Project's Ashe Ashe Cultural Assembly Grant has funded a second printing of Brown 2 for Ujima members in the greater Boston area and beyond, and to reunite us to return to the text together all over the world. If you don't yet have a hard copy of the book and want to read along with us tonight, you can use this link, and I will drop it in the chat now. All right. So let's get started with some simple introductions in the room. What's your name and where are you? If you'd like to specify your pronouns, what do you prefer? And that's it. I'm going to start. I'm Tomashi, and I'm logging in from East Somerville, Massachusetts tonight. I'm going to pass it to, and I'm going to keep answering the door. I'm going to pass it to Nancy.
Okay. Okay, hi, Nancy. I am in Cambridge, about to depart because they raised my rent again. So I'm looking, just getting that out there, sending the universe. Yeah, and I have received the book. Tomashi came to my apartment, and I am just still overwhelmed with the fact that she did. So I'm an artist.
Nancy, you want to pass it to someone else?
Yes,
you even have another Nancy to choose from.
Yeah. Let's see, Matthew Cregor.
Sure, Matt Cregor, zooming in from Dorchester, Massachusetts. Beautiful to be here with this group. I will pass it to Nia K. Evans.
Hi, Matt. I love your voice, Matt. I'm Nia. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm calling from Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I'll pass it to Elizabeth.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth. And I am here in downtown Los Angeles. Yeah. It's 4:28 p.m. Different time zone.
Elizabeth, would you like to pass it to someone? Can you see?
Oh, yeah, I will pass it to, I'll pass it to Martha.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Martha. I'm in Somerville, Massachusetts. If you have not gone yet, maybe raise a hand. I just joined. Awesome. I'll pass it to Camilla.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Camila. I use they, them, and I'm calling in from Roslindale, Massachusetts. And I'm going to pass it to Gio.
I'm the only Gio. I'm Gio, he, him pronouns, community engagement manager of Boston Ujima, tuning in from Dorchester. also known as Shamut. And I'd like to pass it to Donna.
Hi, I'm Donna Bivens. I'm in Roxbury, Mass. Glad to see everybody. And I'll pass it to, let's see. I'll pass it to David. I don't see him, but I know he's here.
I'm here, yo, Donna. I'm David Harris. I'm calling from West Medford, Massachusetts. Whoops, sorry, I forgot my obligations here. Let's see, I'll pass it to Motley.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marlene. I use she, her pronouns. I'm just eating dinner with my family, so I'm going to keep my video off for a moment. And I'm calling in from New Haven. Shoot. Oh, I don't know who didn't go. Alessandra?
Hi, everyone. I'm Alessandra. Hi. I'm calling from Toronto, Canada. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to pass it to Connie. Is Connie there?
You're muted if you're talking, Connie.
We'll come back to Connie. And Jobe?
Hello, everyone. My name is Njobe Dugas. I go by they, them pronouns, and I'm coming from Oakland, California. So you got 2 West Coast people thus far. And I will pass it over to, how about Camila?
I actually just went, or not just went.
I'm sorry.
I went.
Let me go with Sierra.
Can I pass it to Jen?
Thanks.
Sierra, there might be something up with your audio. We couldn't really hear you.
I think she picked it up to me.
Yeah.
I'll just go ahead. I'm Jamin. I'm zooming in from Fort Worth. Glad to be here. And I will pass it to Mona.
Hi, my name is Mona. I use she, her pronouns, and I am calling in from New York City in Brooklyn, and I'll pass it to Stella.
Hi, I'm Stella. I'm calling in from Jamaica Plain. And I'll pass it to Louise.
Okay, I'm Louise, and I'm calling it from South Boston, Mass. And I guess I'll pass it to Sierra.
Sierra went. I think we have Jessica left because Francis, James, and Lise put theirs in the chat. I see a Jessica T.
Okay, Jessica then.
Hi, everybody. My name's Jess. I'm calling in from Rhode Island today. I think it's Wampanoag Narragansett. I get confused and I should know by now, so apologies. And she, her pronouns. Great to see you all. And I'll pass it on to Claudia.
Hi, I'm Claudia. My pronouns are she, hers. I'm beaming in from Jamaica Plain. I don't know why I said plan. Land of the Massachusetts. And is that everyone?
I think Nancy Griffin might be our last person.
Nancy Griffin, I'll pass it to you. Apologies.
I put mine in the chat too. I'm Nancy Griffin, she, her, hers, and I'm calling in from Roxbury. Nice to be with you all.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And again, Madi, they, them, calling from North Cambridge. Thank you, Nancy, for chiming in. I'm just seeing who else is in the chat. Francis, no, that's actually, no, wait a minute. Florence, there was someone here. Hopefully she'll come back. Sorry, I'm a little emotionally attached. Frances, she, her, on the unceded land and territory of the Lenapehoc and Mohicanac, and also known as Kingston, New York. James calling in from Jamaica Plain. All right. So let's get started.
And Lise in Randolph.
And Lise in Randolph. You called Lisa's name.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So awesome, everyone. Thank you. And let's get started reading. I just want to return to my script. Awesome. Let's get started with our reading. Okay, so let's turn to page 29 in the hard copy. If you have your hard copy, now's the time to pull it out. Page 29 in the hard copy. And if you're using the PDF, you'll be turning to page 17. So while we read, I want to encourage you all to jump into the chat with any thoughts or comments or reflections that you have, so that they're ready for us to return to when we stop to reflect with our discussants. Okay, so I'm going to share screen. Also, we need people to read. So if you'd like to sign up, if you'd like to jump in and read, you can also jump into the chat and write stack. I think that's the way the young kids are doing it now. Yep. Okay, cool. So
and each person is reading 2 paragraphs each.
Thank you so much, Nia. So we'll start reading, and then when we're done reading, we'll introduce our 4 discussants who are here to help us close out and reflect on these lives that are transcribed in this 1,000-word conversation with Tomiko Brown-Nagin. On the legacy and leadership of Ida B. Wells, Pauli Murray, Constance Baker Motley, and Ruth Batson with Tomiko Brown-Nagin. Tomiko Brown-Nagin is the Dean of the Radcliffe Institute for Advanced Study, an award-winning legal historian and an expert in constitutional law and education law and policy. She's also the Daniel P.S. Paul Professor of Constitutional Law at Harvard Law School and a professor of history in the Harvard Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Brown-Nagin has served as faculty director of Harvard Law School's Charles Hamilton Houston Institute and as co-director of the Harvard Law School's Law and History program. Her current book project is on the life and times of Constance Baker Motley. Brown-Nagin, in this conversation, Brown-Nagin shares the stories of 4 people whose leadership, intellect, and courage helped advance the causes of racial justice, civil rights, education, and educational equality. In connecting the work of these activist leaders, she situates Brown v. Board of Education within larger and more enduring patterns of inequality that structure access to resources, knowledge, and power. The following text has been edited and condensed from an interview with Tomiko Brown-Nagin. I'd like to pass.
I can jump in, and then we could do sec. Ida B. Wells, Pauli Murray, Constance Baker Motley, and Ruth Batson were women of great courage who took a personal risk to advance the cause of Black freedom, civil rights, and each did that in a particular professional role. Ida B. Wells was essentially a traveling investigative journalist who became enraged about the horror of lynching in the South and set out to document the lynchings, their circumstances, the violence to Black bodies at the hands of vigilantes. She was a crusader for justice and for African Americans who were subject to tremendous cruelty and suffering. Like these other women, Wells understood what we now call intersectionality. She understood the multiple ways in which oppression is experienced by women and by people of color. She was not only a founder of the NAACP and a crusading journalist, but also an advocate for women's suffrage. She famously joined the 1913 suffrage march in Washington, D.C., and she did it on her own terms. As you may know, some women's suffrage proponents were overtly racist. They did not like it when Wells and some 60 other Black women came to the march. The Black women were actually told to go to the back. They were not proper representatives of the cause of women's suffrage who supported her. The cause of women's suffrage. They were not properly represented women's suffrage who supported her. Suffrage Wells refused. She marched with Illinois delegation along white women who supported her and took a stand. She took her place in history in so many ways, raising her voice, being courageous, using her intellect, and the same can be said for all of these women. Pass.
Nancy Hart.
Pauli Murray was a civil rights lawyer. She wrote a book called States, Laws on Race and Color, which was a survey of all the laws that in 1950 mandated segregation. Think about how useful that would have been to the NAACP lawyers who were setting out at the time to build a legal case against segregation. This was before Google, before any of the resources that would have made assembling a list of segregation laws much easier. She came up with this indispensable resource for the NAACP and was appreciated for it. She went on to use her brilliant legal mind to devise the idea of Jane Crow, which was Murray's way of insisting that both racial discrimination and gender or sex discrimination needed to be understood as harming Black women. She was a lawyer who aided the civil rights struggle. And I guess it goes, and then to B, the next page 32, there's a, what do you call it, comma. So B, precedents for sudden mass. No,
Nancy,
it goes
sorry.
to the next. It goes to the next one.
Yeah, why don't you continue on page 34?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Should I pass or keep going? Finish this one.
Yeah. Why don't you finish the paragraph?
Okay. Yeah, the paragraph, the Black freedom struggle. She also laid the groundwork for the recognition of sex discrimination as a form of disadvantage that should be prescribed under law, and was so credited by Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is better known as a champion of women's rights. And she was a co-founder of the National Organization for Women. She used her voice on behalf of others in a very powerful way. Pass.
Jamin.
Constance Baker Motley was often the only woman in the courtroom. She was a civil rights lawyer who helped make the field of civil rights law. Motley built on the knowledge and strategy that Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston had devised, based in part on the work that Pauli Murray did. And she helped litigate hundreds of cases that ended legal racial segregation in this country. She helped kill Jim Crow by being a fierce advocate in the courtroom. She was known for her ability to cross-examine the many white men who were in positions of power over school systems in the South. She made them look foolish by so clearly undermining and exposing the lies they were telling about segregation. She was an amazing lawyer, a person of incredible courage. Her life was so much under threat that when she traveled to southern cities, men would guard her and her colleagues at night with machine guns. There was such a threat of violence against the NAACP lawyers who were simply trying to advance the principles articulated in the Constitution of the United States. Motley was a fantastic warrior for justice. After working for 20 years with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund as Thurgood Marshall's protege, she moved into politics. She served as Manhattan Borough president and as a New York senator, and she used her voice to push for equality in education and social supports for all people, certainly for working class people. Then she went on to the courtroom and had a long career as the first Black woman appointed to the federal judiciary. In my work about Motley, I describe her as someone who both made change and personified the change she was making. She went from being an outsider who was agitating to being an insider at the pinnacle of the justice system in this country. Ruth Batson is the person I would say is best identified with and perhaps most responsible for and instrumental in the desegregation of the Boston schools. She accomplished that through advocacy in the NAACP. She started her fight in the 1950s and was unable to get those in power to side with her perspective until 1974, when Judge Garrity famously ordered the Boston schools to desegregate. It was deeply controversial because unlike in the South, where laws mandated segregation, in the city of Boston and in Massachusetts at that time, there was not segregation by law. Through her advocacy, calling out the disparities in terms of resources, teachers, and facilities, Batson laid the groundwork for this amazing development in law, which is to say that discrimination takes many forms. It doesn't have to be only on the books. It can be shown by examining the actions of school district officials in Boston. She was another one of these women who used her voice. She was incredibly courageous and made social change. Pass.
Claudia?
We have moved, and we should move, beyond thinking about struggle in terms of great men. In the context of the civil rights movement, Martin Luther King Jr. and Thurgood Marshall were incredible leaders, but they were not alone. Ida B. Wells, Pauli Murray, Constance Baker Motley, and Ruth Batson, who are not as well known as they should be, represent the fact that struggles against oppression have been advanced by individuals known and unknown across time. One of the things that linking the histories of these women reveals is that violence as a form of resistance to change is not aberrational. It's consistent across history. It's a pattern that one sees over and over again. In the struggles for justice, there is law. There is oppression through politics. There is oppression in the home. There is oppression of the body, and there is out and out violence, and they're all of a piece. You asked about the public health crisis of today. Again, it's all of a piece. The crisis in public health reflects, in part, all the ways in which opportunity determines health status, determines whether one can be healthy, live a healthy lifestyle. And the communities where one sees educational disadvantages are also places where there's less access to healthcare, to quality food, to unpolluted air, to water that's clean instead of poisonous. These are patterns of disadvantage. Pass.
Alessandra?
Among civil rights scholars, what we've come to understand is just a continuum of struggle. It used to be that scholars would look at particular moments in time and talk about the significance of those moments. For instance, you might consider Brown versus the Board of Education an important moment. We've in some ways moved towards doing precisely what you're doing, connecting the anti-lynching struggle to the suffrage struggle, to the civil rights movement, to Black Lives Matter, to the fight against mass incarceration. It's all of a piece, and it's a movement that seeks to bring allies together. So the struggle of people who are in bondage on account of race has similarities to and needs to be understood as connected to the struggle of people who find themselves oppressed because of sexual orientation, who find themselves dehumanized and thrown away by society because they may or may not have committed some kind of crime. It's a way of saying we need to struggle together. All these people are struggling together, and there's power in appreciating the struggle of humanity for justice. Pass.
Francis?
This is pushing back against a particular understanding of Brown v. Board of Education, which is that it's about the deficits of Black children, bringing them into white spaces in order to improve them. No, really, it's about power. It's about our access to power, being able to gain the knowledge that helps one fully be a part of society, and access to funding. There's a saying in the community of civil rights leaders that green, meaning money, follows white. That's a very different understanding of what the struggle for school desegregation was about than one that emphasizes Black kids sitting in a classroom beside white kids. That emphasis on resources is good. Although I believe in social integration, it is just one strand of what those lawyers hoped to achieve. What they were seeking was power. Knowledge is power, resources are power. And the lawyers were coming from a place of just incredible fortitude, courage, intellect, all in search of power and justice.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to do something that we haven't done in previous sessions, which is turn to two pages of illustrations in the book, which in this case are excerpts from our interview preparatory documents that we produced to prepare for our conversation with Dean Brown-Nagin. And this was our way of bypassing our word limit because there was actually so much involved in this conversation that we couldn't include in the 1,000 word excerpt. So I'm gonna try something we haven't done in previous sessions, which is to actually read the illustrated page. And if there's anyone left in the stack to jump in, that would be awesome.
Francis was the last person in the stack.
I can read some more if that helps.
Yep.
And we're on 32, correct?
Yes.
Precedents for sudden mass closures of schools through the lens of Brown v. Board of Education Resistance. In the 2004 report, Beyond Brown v. Board, The Final Battle for Excellence in American Education, author Ellis Coase describes the following, quote, after the Supreme Court ordered desegregation with all deliberate speed, Prince Edward officials swore to use every legal honorable means to continue the high type of education we proposed, to give the children of both races in Prince Edward County. Following the precedent set in Clarendon County, a 3-judge federal panel approved a delay in the implementation of desegregation. When delay was no longer an option, Prince Edward County closed its public schools altogether. From fall of 1959 through much of 1964, the schools were shuttered. We underestimated the resolve of the white population of Prince Edward County. No one ever thought that they would rather close the schools, and no one ever thought that the United States of America would let it go on so long, observed John Stokes. Is there anyone stacked and ready?
Yep. Donna?
All right, I'll pass.
Thanks, Francis. Donna? Donna, you might be muted if you're speaking or reading.
Yes, I was reading right along. If you were white, that was not necessarily a tragedy. Those whose parents had a little money could go to the Prince Edward Academy, the newly established private school. But Blacks who were barred from the state-subsidized segregation academies were not so fortunate. Most saw their education hopes wither until so-called free schools were finally opened in the fall of 1963. The lucky ones managed to go to school elsewhere. Many were helped by the American Friends Service Committee, which set up emergency student placement programs in 1960 to send students out of the county to get an education. Some parents developed their own ad hoc relocation plans. Benita Foster was preparing to enter the 4th grade when the schools were shut down. Most of my friends did not go anywhere. They languished in Farmville. When schools finally opened, they were so far behind that college seemed an unattainable dream. They did not think they could do the work, recalled Foster. I think that we lost a lot of the doctors we could have had, a lot of teachers who could have helped. I think it's had an impact on their children, and in some cases, their grandchildren. Pass.
Mona?
Should I read this bottom portion or to the right here on C?
You can start at the bottom, Mona, at Dean Brown-Nagin.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dean Brown-Nagin, can you share your thoughts about the backlash to Brown v. Board of Education 1 and 2 and the historic precedent of rapid, sudden, and brutal closure of schools in the United States? What understanding can be gained by fully acknowledging this history and those directly impacted by it when considering the current global public health crisis, the subsequent closure of school campuses, and the mass displacement of an entire generation of students? And then I'll go on to see. Dean Brown-Nagin, please read this poem written by Pauli Murray. How does it illustrate the historic humanist impulses of Well, Murray, Baker, Motley, and Batson? Shall I keep going or pass?
Would anyone like to read the poem? Anyone else? Thank you so much, Mona.
Marlene is on stack.
Psalm of Deliverance to the Negro school children of the American South in the year 1959. Children of courage, we greet you. Gentle warriors, we salute you. Should I stop there or should I keep going? Sorry to interrupt the poem.
Oh yeah, do you mind doing the whole poem, Marlene?
Yeah, sure. I'm going to start over just to give Pauli Murray her justice. Okay.
Thank you.
Children of courage, we greet you. Gentle warriors, we salute you. Youthful veterans of upheaval, victims of mindless resistance, we, the wounded and dead of former campaigns, unknown, unheralded, unribboned, the nameless millions, native and migrant, we are legion and we support you. From restless graves and swamps and bayous, from slave ships, slave pens, chain gangs and prisons, from ruined churches and blazing lynch trees, from gas chambers and mass crematoriums, from foxholes, ghettos, detention camps, from lonely outposts of exclusion, we hear your marching feet and rise. Silently, we walk beside you. We have returned from a place beyond hope. We have returned from wastelands of despair. We have come to reclaim our heritage. We have come to redeem our honor.
Okay, now we're finished. Oh, but we're not. Thank you everyone for reading. Thank you so much. Just gonna return to my, my script. Okay, so thank you everyone for reading. Now we're gonna pause for some reflection and discussion while I introduce our quadruple lineup of discussants tonight. Feel free to post any of your reflections or questions in the chat. And as I pick on them, and they say things that are enlightening and empowering and moving and thoughtful, feel free to continue to put your thoughts in the chat. So I'm going to start with Nia. Nia Evans is the executive director of the Boston Ujima Project. And my best friend. I shouldn't say that. I think she's amazing. Her educational background is in areas of labor relations, education leadership, and policy. Her advocacy includes a focus on eliminating barriers between analysts and people with lived experiences, as well as increasing acknowledgement of the value of diverse types of expertise in policy. She is a co-creator, along with myself, of the Frames Debate Project, a multimedia policy debate project that explores the intersection between drug policy, mental health services, and incarceration in the state of Massachusetts. Ms. Evans has a BS in Industrial and Labor Relations from Cornell University and a Master's of Arts in Education Leadership with a course study in Leadership Policy and Politics from Teachers College at Columbia University, where she did particularly well in education law, Matt. She did particularly well in education law. She also studied abroad at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, where she focused on international labor relations, and informally, she focused on dancing. I just happen to know that. So that's Nia. Next up, we have David J. Harris, who's the former managing director of the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice at Harvard Law School. Harris has extensive experience in many facets of civil rights issues, from police brutality and racial profiling to redistricting and domestic violence, as well as fair housing and community development. Prior to his position at the Charles Hamilton Houston Institute, he served as founding executive director of the Fair Housing Center of Greater Boston. During his tenure, the Fair Housing Center became nationally recognized among fair housing organizations. The center's work generated several original analyses of housing discrimination patterns in Greater Boston, and the organization became a leading force in fair housing and regional equity. He's also, his generosity, his brilliance, and his patience with us as a research team inspired this entire project. Like, where it ended up going was really, the day that Harvard went into lockdown was the day that we met with him. Okay, look, this is I got the mic right now, David. We love David J. Harris, and his generosity and wisdom inspired what became this book. Next up is Donna Bivens. See, all right, Donna Bivens. Another key brick in the inspiration wall of this project. Everyone we spoke to said, speak to Donna first. Donna Bivens is a diversity, inclusion, and equity consultant and trainer. As director of the Boston Busing Desegregation Project, she worked with the Union of Minority Neighborhoods to collect stories from community members about Boston in the 1970s and 1980s. and members' own experiences of school desegregation in the film Can We Talk? Learning from Boston's busing desegregation crisis, which was made public in 2011. Yeah, every single person that we spoke to directed us to Donna Bivens, and Donna actually became our first interview in the collection of the book. So when you look through the PDF or your hard copy, you see this rainbow of conversations. Donna's not the first. It's Rachel Vogel organized it so that it would be a story. But in fact, Donna was our very first interview, and you can tell because I took a picture of the conversation of her and of Martha Schnee making drawings of the conversation with my cell phone, because at the time I didn't know how to do a screen capture. So things become more sophisticated as we went on in the project. And last, certainly not least, close to all of our hearts is Matthew Cregor, a civil rights attorney who has practiced education law with the NAACP Legal Educational Defense Fund, the Southern Poverty Law Center, Lawyers for Civil Rights, and I still say the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Economic Justice. I really like that title. The Lawyers for Civil Rights, and now the Mental Health Legal Advisors Committee. In these roles, Professor Cregor has worked on a host of K through 12 and higher education issues, including racial harassment, voluntary integration, admissions, teacher diversity, school funding, special education, and school discipline. Professor Cregor is proudest of the work he has done in partnership with community organizations, including his work with the parent-led, student-led, and educator-led base building groups of the National Dignity in Schools campaign to secure federal school discipline reform during the Obama administration. He has served on education-related advisory groups for the Council of State Governments, New York State Permanent Judicial Commission on Justice for Children, Northeastern University, and Boston Public Schools, among others. Matt Cregor is a former public school teacher and the 2018 recipient of the Boston Bar Association's John G. Brooks Legal Services Award, and a continual inspiring force in my work, my research-driven work that always becomes visualized when it comes to the law and how it shapes our experience of reality. I always turn to Matt and Nia, and they tolerate me, which I appreciate. So these are our discussants, y'all. This is who we're here with. So now let's return to the text and to the drawings, if you will. The person who made those drawings is in the room. Martha Schnee is with us tonight, or she might still be here. Where should we start?
Well, just real quick, Tomashi, in the chat, Francis wrote, thinking about how quote unquote education, access to restriction from compulsory has been used to oppress groups and genocide them, i.e. indigenous residential and boarding schools.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I actually just want to hand it over to you for, maybe I'll start with you. Maybe I'll start with Donna. Everyone says start with Donna. Donna, so I asked you for it to come together. Thank you for that, Francis. I asked you for it to come together to so that we could reread this chapter, which in months prior, I felt like we kind of read through it kind of quickly. And I wanted you all to help us understand these lives. Ruth Batson, Pauli Murray, Ida B. Wells, Constance Baker Motley. Donna, can you help us? Maybe can you start off with Ruth Batson, since you all were here? Can you pick a hero, any hero, and start telling us about how to contextualize them historically?
Well, to me, Ruth Batson, well, it's said in here, she was like the center of why one of the central leaders in terms of the desegregation effort. And I think that throughout, for me, there was a sense that her voice in history got sort of pushed to the side, marginalized. And that was really upsetting because there was a huge, I don't know, well, you remember that book, what was it called? Common Ground, right? And that was one of the main complaints that I heard from Black community about that book, was that the story from our perspective as the Black community was really marginalized in that book. And there were chapters of all these leaders, but there was no chapter of any Black leader, and there should have been a chapter about Ruth Batson. And, so I was talking to somebody just recently. She wrote in response to the way that Common Ground tried to grab the story, she wrote a book herself that I think is at Northeastern now, where she compiled just a whole history of what had really happened and the documents about how they fought segregation in Boston. And I know I'd invited Lou Finfer, who's trying to get a new effort to look at the deseg next year when it's the 50th anniversary, because he's just really trying to get that book made into a book. Somebody needs to take it and publish it, and to get it together. So Ruth Batson. I also want to say just really quickly, Pauli Murray too is really important to me. I worked for many years at the Women's Theological Center, and Pauli Murray was just a heroine. She just her work, her brilliance, and she was an Episcopal priest, which is the connection that we had to her. But yeah, I'm so glad these women are being lifted. I love Ida B. Wells. I don't know as much about Constance Motley, although I heard about her for years. But those other three have been my heroes for many years.
Thanks, Donna. Do you want to, would you pass it to one of your other discussants?
Who wants to talk? I didn't want to go first, but who wants to talk?
That's right. You just do it. Just do it like it got done to you. Just
How about you, Matt? I want to hear from you.
Sure, it's beautiful to be with you. I would just, I want to lift this up for the start of it. This whole thing is about Brown too, but not only would there be no Brown v. Board of Education without Ida B. Wells and just the entirety of the Black freedom struggle that led to these efforts, right? But these women played pivotal roles in this, right? Pauli Murray, as a law student in Spotswood G. Robinson's class at Howard Law, made a bet with her professor, who became one of the chief strategists of the desegregation effort, that Plessy v. Ferguson and Separate but Equal would be undone in 20 years, right? She made this bet with him in the 1940s, right? And she did it by crystallizing a vision for the desegregation battle that was not existent before her, right? Where most of the effort had been spent on collecting the data and the evidence that things were unequal, right? Murray shifted that on its head and developed a thesis in her time at Howard Law to focus instead on separate, right? And how separate was inherently unequal. And to her peers at the time, this meant this was foolishness because it could only lead to a resounding affirmation of Plessy v. Ferguson, right? Or affirmance of Plessy v. Ferguson. But she brought that fight, right? And so when Spotswood G. Robinson was sitting down with this legal team, he is fishing out Pauli Murray's thesis from her time at Howard Law and letting her interpretation of the 13th and 14th Amendments guide the strategy. Right? So this does not happen without Pauli Murray, right? Nor does this happen without Constance Baker Motley, who, as Thurgood Marshall's protege, was actually the drafter of the complaint in Brown v. Board of Education, long before anything else that she did in an illustrious public career, right? She was the one putting pen to paper in the lawsuit that became Brown, right? So this, and as Donna said, nothing moves in Boston without Ruth Batson forcing it to move. So I think it's really powerful to align these figures together in this work. And from there, I will pass it to David Harris.
So thank you, Matt and Donna and Tomashi and everybody. I want to say, Tomashi, you get extra credit for turning Matt Cregor red. So that was really sweet. It just made me frown, but you made him go red. There are a couple of things that I wanted to say. I mean, I wanted to, if you can change the picture to page 45, Tomashi. To me, and I want to talk a minute about Ruth Batson. I want everybody to look very closely at that picture. That is a remarkable picture, right? And the thing I want to say is that, I didn't know Ruth Batson, and I only kind of know about her from historically, but she was a real person. I mean, she, and you can see it in that photograph. You can see in that photograph that the liveliness, the vitality, the warmth, the love that she shared with others, right? I mean, all the other pictures we saw were people standing by themselves. We see Ruth Batson in a living room, right? And this is the work that we do. This is where the spirit of the work that led up to Brown and that followed from Brown lives. It lived then, it lives today. And I, when I talked, with you all before, I said, and again, I look at this picture and I am reminded of my own life. I was raised by a single Black woman. And it's given me this, so all of the people we're talking about here today, and I'm going to ramble a bit because I want to add a name. I want to add a name to our conversation. That's Fannie Lou Hamer. And I do that, it's not exactly in the context of what you're talking about, but it is an important giant and person that we really should acknowledge and embrace. Now, embrace is a loaded term these days, so I want to be careful what I say. But the thing about, and I dwell on Fannie Lou Hamer for a very specific reason, and that's because on January 31st, 3 years ago, a woman named Lily A. Estes, who was a dear and wonderful colleague of mine in Richmond, Virginia, and a community organizer of the First Order, died at the age of 56. And I always used to say about Lily that she was the Fannie Lou Hamer of Richmond, Virginia. And yet, I don't know, I am rambling, but my point is that people like Ruth Batson and Fannie Lou Hamer, exist in a way outside of the spotlight, right? You're not going to read about them in the law books. I mean, Matt's right about Constance Motley Baker and right about all these others. They were incredible minds and incredibly important people. But the movement lived below that radar in just the way that we're having this conversation right now. So I'm sorry, Tomash, that's what I got to say. Aside from the fact that I also, so we're talking about the embrace, I got this picture up that, that I found when this sculpture came out on, and I saw this, I don't know if you can see, I see I'm blocking out Martin Luther King, but if you look at what, if you can look at the way their arms are locked there, and if you can look at the image of Coretta Scott King there, that's the image that I hold, and that's the image that I have of the importance of those two, right? So I'm gonna stop.
Thank you, David. Can you stand up one more time so I can see that picture? Thank you. And you have nothing to apologize about. I just want to make sure I get a screen cap of what I'm seeing. Wow, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm gonna unpin you. You feel me hugging you? Do you feel that? Okay, so actually, David, you get to toss the popcorn now. And you have to unmute. Here, I'll help. You gotta unmute.
Wait, I'm sorry, I'm muted.
Yeah.
Who's left? Wait, what am I? Nia, did you go?
I didn't go, David, which is
I'm sorry.
Oh no, you're fine. Tomashi is giggling because I also told her to leave me alone tonight. But
At everybody else's discomfort, right? Look at her.
But you know what? I actually want to, I guess, kind of just affirm and extend a bit what you just talked about, David. So Donna wrote in the chat, yes, I want to clarify that Ruth Batson didn't write her book for her own self. She said the Black community's whole story was left out of Common Ground. And so there's a thread here. So Donna, when you kind of talked about, Ruth Batson's role being erased in a sense, this took me to some of our previous conversations where we talked about archives. And David, when you pointed out the photo, which I really appreciate, for me, this is tying together essentially this kind of notion, and we've been talking about this throughout this micropod series of archives and records and history and value. And one of the things that we saw when we were looking at some of the other drawings and pictures and photos in this text is how they were archived. And so, David, you pointed out this picture to say this was a real person. And one of the things that we saw in some of the previous pods is because Black life was being recorded and documented, it was not archived a certain way. And so I really actually appreciate you pulling this piece out. And I would say kind of pointing to the multiple dimensions of movement in general, the multiple dimensions of this work, which is, as you said, it's not an eternal moment of I'm just going to say kind of up and down posture, for lack of a better phrase. It includes these moments that we see here. It includes daily Black life, and we saw how it was undervalued by historians. And so for me, there's a link between that and between Ruth Batson's story in particular, for example, being underappreciated, and also appreciating throughout the text. And there's one paragraph of Tomiko Brown, of Brown-Nagin, where she says, we have moved kind of beyond these kind of great man retellings of history. And in her chapter focuses on these four women, and also says exactly what you say here, David. Actually, I'm on the wrong page because I went to the photo, but also says, Ida B. Wells, Pauli Murray, Constance Baker Motley, and Ruth Batson, who are not as well known as they should be, represent the fact that struggles against oppression have been advanced by individuals known and unknown across time. So just affirming what you've said, David, what you've said, Matt, what you've said, Donna, and then I would just add to that, Donna, again, appreciating you wrote in the chat, Ruth wrote that book not for herself, but thinking about Black communities as a whole. So this also just makes me think about other archives conversations that we've hosted, where we've talked about the importance of self-archiving. And the importance of publishing our own records and our own histories. And this text is serving as one of those. So I'm also just thinking about that as well.
Thanks, Nia. Okay, so all of our discussants have chimed in, and this is our last go round. So I'd like to open the floor to everyone else in the room. Any thoughts, responses? Martha, how does it feel to have four of our discussants in the room, and you're not charged with drawing them this time? You actually get to sit back and listen. How do you feel?
It feels like time travel. I was just feeling that, because to see these words on the page and then see us in the Zoom and then see us in the Zoom in the picture, it's pretty wild. And just also thinking about the archival element, coming back and thinking about how we made an archive of something and watching it come into life. And continuing to illuminate. So I'm kind of in like the 7th dimension right now.
And just really quickly, we have a couple of comments from Alessandra and Claudia in the chat, and Kelly has her hand up. But Alessandra said, the monumentality and power of those everyday emotions and expressions, small moments of connection and community, how people carry themselves. And Claudia said, also the power of seeing Kodachrome photographs versus black and white. It breaks through the veil of dissonance.
Thanks for that, Nia. And thanks, Claudia and Alessandra, for talking in the chat. Kelly, your hand is raised. Welcome, Kelly Dennis, another incredible attorney of this generation for the Shinnecock people on Long Island. Kelly, what's up with you?
Hey. I always love catching these when I can. I've been on a few others, mostly listening in. But I saw what Frances, Catherine wrote and then Nia read, and listening to your conversation about archiving. And so my brother down at Ma's house just worked with some native people, I think from Seneca Indian Nation, because they're the closest, I think, to the boarding school here in New York, and a lot of, I think, Massachusetts natives went there too. And it's a traveling exhibit, so I'm not sure where they're going next. But one of my cousins, I had no idea, had a letter that she kept from my great-great-grandfather, who was sent to Thomas Indian School, and it was like the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. He wrote to his mother in like the most beautiful script that you never imagine. And like everything was spelled right, and he listed everything that the nuns were preparing or had food for them at the dinner. And I'm just like, this feels forced and fake to me. But also like, imagining, him and like maybe the pencil being held or the pen, and then what that was like, and really like when, there's so many terrible stories that have come down and he never wanted to talk about his experience. And then to have his children, they didn't go to boarding schools, but my grandparents were sent to sanatoriums and couldn't go to school because I guess there was like a bad sickness in like the 1920s. And so, yeah, it's all connected here. And another interesting thing where I'm from, that we have a lot of intermarriage with Black people. And so the Seneca people often are like they discriminate against us because we don't fit that phenotypical like Western or whatever native thing. And we embrace that we're like a rainbow of people, and people don't get that. And so like, we have some records where some of us were actually sent to Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania, but then they said our hair was too curly and we were too dark, and we weren't like, I guess a lot of them were like made to be servants instead of actually educated. And so, however, trained to fit in as much as they could into white people where, you're killing the Indian and saving the man. But they still took us up with Thomas Indian School. So go figure. I don't know. It's a weird history, a weird thing looking, and it was just a eye-opening to see that at Ma's house. And I was just so thankful for my relatives who did keep that archive of letters and pictures, and because I would have never even realized that happened. It was great. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And I'm having a thought right now about how we selected images from this archive, and I want to kick it back to Martha. Oh, look at that.
What timing?
I want to kick it back to Martha, and I want to, I'm gonna keep my finger hovered over the mute button in case David jumps up at me for talking too much about him. But in that first conversation that we had on the day that Harvard campus evacuated for the first time since the 1700s, we spoke with David for something like 2.5 hours, and it was somewhere around the 50th minute in the first hour that I realized that I should be recording it. And so then I recorded, and actually, yeah, we'll talk about that some other time, Martha. But you know, we started recording, and in that conversation, David talked about imagery. David talked about image. We talked with you about the sort of images that historically illustrate desegregation in Boston in the 70s. And I remember David talking about how much pain it causes him to see certain images of the belligerent violence and the deprivation of Black communities and Black children and Black families. And we carried that with us, David. We carried that with us in our decision-making way down the line as we chose from images from Pauli Murray's papers and Ruth Batson's papers and other documentation that the research team, K. Anthony Jones, found at Northeastern University to encapsulate what it looked like here during that time. And we actually had to fight sometimes not to include images that are stereotypically associated with Boston desegregation. We really had to like convince people and teach people that those are not the images that we were centering in this effort. That we found in the archival material that Martha took us into in the Schlesinger Library, we found images of self-possession, of community, of love, of organizing, of reclamation, of normalcy. And so K. Anthony said really wisely at one point, what is our what is our archival impulse? We have to ask ourselves, what is our archival impulse? Is our impulse to reactivate, re-traumatize through imagery of Black people suffering, of little girls being chased by people throwing rocks at buses, you know, all the things that we know happened here and the things that are continuing to happen all over this country? Or are we going to choose imagery that uplifts this other archive of self-possession and unity? So Martha, I want to kick it over to you since you're the one who took us into the archive right before things got crazy, actually.
Yeah, I'm looking at some photos. I don't know if it will come through, but here is us. This is Tomashi like smiling, holding some images. And there was so much, particularly in Ruth Batson's archive, of just her like grinning and smiling and having the best joyous time, or these like small, this is an image of just like a party, these internal scenes that, yeah, we just moved towards what was joyous and the stories that were there. We had to wear these blue gloves to hold them. So it's pretty hard to see, but, oh, right. Nia's saying everyone can see. This is really cool. It's, I believe Tomashi holding one of the images that ended up being published. So there was a very intimate experience of being there. And also there's an image of Pauli Murray on the wall. And so if folks have a physical copy with the bookmark, this is describing that experience. So maybe I'll just read it because I think it tells that story well. As sunshine beamed through the windows, we sat beneath a framed portrait of Pauli Murray and reconsidered what we thought we knew about how this history looked. We asked ourselves, what would visualizing this history look like through a lens of Black love, care, and coalition? So yeah, the sunlight, Pauli Murray, the images, the love and care. Yeah, that was really guiding us. So yeah, and then everything shut down like the next day.
Yeah, the next day. And we really held firm not to include images of Ted Landsmark being attacked, the photograph that's historically known as the soiling of Old Glory. We were very intentional not to use images like that and to lead instead with this compass, this ethical compass that again, you know, starts with the people in this room. Nia, I see your hand is up. You gonna
Yes,
close?
can I ask you a question, Tomashi? So this is with regards to Claudia's comment about seeing the Kodachrome photographs versus black and white. And you've talked about this a little bit with some of your work. So can you just talk about how you've considered, for example, historical documents, historical photographs to black and white, and then some of the decisions you've made with regards to color in your work in that respect?
Wow, really getting me back, huh? Really getting me back.
You're welcome.
Claudia, can you say more? And I'll see what's in here, but I think you've got to say more.
Sure, yeah. Well, I was thinking about when David showed us the photograph that's behind him of Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, and how that is an image that's in color, and how rare it is that there's wide distribution of photographs of people of color in color. From times that aren't so long ago, and having it in black and white allows for a lot more cognitive dissonance, right? Allows for people to feel like, oh, this is from like hundreds of years ago. Like sometimes people look at black and white photos and think it's like a cyanotype or a daguerreotype or something, like there's this like removal of time, right? And depending on what your relationship is to black and white photos, but yeah, I think I'm kind of touching on that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my experience, Claudia, when I was in school, and my research in my second attempt at graduate school, my second successful attempt at grad. I don't want to make it sound like I'm going places and not like finishing, but Nia wouldn't let that happen. But before I left to study painting, Nia was working with Matt and other people in a coalition to try to preserve what remained of yellow school bus service for Boston public school children, and most families hadn't even been alerted, not formally. And this was something that was going to happen within months. Are you saying Donna's hand is raised? Should I stop?
No, Donna was a part of that coalition as well.
Yeah, so everyone in here was involved in that effort in 2014. And Nia dragged me around to document and to just to help. So we were talking to people on Boston Common. We talked to young people. We talked to homeless youth. We learned firsthand about what young people who were already marginalized experience at the hands of the T police, MBTA police. Thank you. And so I was walking around with the camera. I video recorded the conversations that were happening in City Hall, the town hall conversations that happened. Nia, Matt, and others testified, and I was shocked. I was shocked and live and in color at how willing to cast multiple generations of children to the wind to make an ideological point about undoing busing. I just couldn't believe it. So I watched all that happen in color, and then I went to school and I concluded that I didn't know anything about Brown. Nia studied at Teachers College and had binders full of information having to do with the 50th anniversary of Brown in our apartment. And I came home crying after one of these hearings. I was starting to have flashbacks of things that I suppressed in my own experience about being sexually assaulted and harassed on public transportation. I completely forgot that it happened. And I remembered listening to these hearings as young people and parents talked about how concerned they were about, one mother from Charlestown, a white woman, her child had been accepted to Boston Latin School, and she had already skipped a grade. So she must have been like 95 pounds soaking wet, this child. And she agreed to let her child go to Boston Latin School, a very important decision, because she knew that her child was going to have yellow school bus service to get her there while she was on her way to work. And she testified that it was a completely unreasonable expectation that she should send her 12-year-old daughter out in the dark during daylight savings time in inclement weather to get to Boston Latin School, still a very important exam school to get into if a child expects to go to college, which is a whole other issue, that it should be that one school should be so important in an entire system. And I was just shocked. I was bused to my school. I was bused to an arts magnet school in Los Angeles. And I didn't know. None of this was historicized for us, that it was a bloody battle for us to have what was normal for us to gain access to arts and humanities in the 80s in Southern California. So Nia helped me understand that this had little to do with children as individuals, but had more to do with undoing the gains made by Brown. And then I didn't understand that Brown was more than one case. I didn't understand anything, I realized. And so when I got a chance to go back to school, I used that time to spend time at the Yale Law Library and pull out books and start reading the case transcripts, because I'm a complete beneficiary who did not even understand that I was. And the images that I found were Black and white. And so I started taking those images from the public domain and turning them into halftone lines and trying to do things with them in the studio. And then I present that to my cohort members for critique. Critique is very, very important. You really get, good, bad, or otherwise, what people's first reactions are. Allie knows this because I got to be Allie's teacher when they were at RISD. And our crits were very thorough, right, Allie? So I present these images, still not knowing exactly what I was going to do with them, but my attempt was to visualize, how do you visualize a legislative history that completely defines public space for everyone involved in public space, whether or not we even understand the implications of that governance? How do you visualize that? How do you visualize fog? And so I found these images because the NAACP LDF was doing things that had never been done before, like presenting photo documentation and sociological research to make their argument about what happens to Black communities, Black families, and Black children under the heavy hand of de jure segregation and deprivation. But the images were Black and white. So I'd take them like a printmaker. Cooper Union taught me how to be a printmaker. I'd take those images, turn them into halftone lines, and then try to do something with them. And I present them to my classmates. And their first response was, this looks like you're talking about something that happened a long time ago. This looks like you're talking about a history that happened a long time ago. And the longer I stayed on this subject, as Black child after Black child after Black teenager after Black teenager was being killed or maimed, Black children, Indigenous children, Brown children, people were being killed and maimed under the yoke of police brutality without any remorse and without stopping. Those years, 2014 to 2016 were, I don't know. I don't even know if it's any different from now, but at the time it felt just completely overwhelming. And so I was focusing on the treatment of Black children in public space. And I found a correlation. I found a collapse with the present, with these extremes, like extreme deprivation, extreme dehumanization. And so I started to try to merge these images together to insist that the past is the present. I started to understand that these as I was reading these case transcripts, these legal documents, how inhumanely Black children or colored children were considered. And then I saw it and I was like, oh, this is what's happening now. It's like in those hearings in Boston, people were talking about their children having to take 2 buses and 2 trains to get to school without any concern for delinquency or, for tardiness. What do they call it, Nia? What's the tardy?
Truancy.
Truancy. So there's like consequences for truancy that affect people's grades, that people end up in detention, there are all these other fallout consequences for not providing transportation to children to get safely to and from school. And at the time, we were just ahead of a terrible snowstorm, a winter storm that broke the T, like promptly following all of that. The T where all of these children were supposed to just be thrust into public transportation after with no documentation, with no research about the impact that would have on them. None at all. And you know, the people who have been talked to, who have been surveyed since then, all the girls are being sexually assaulted. All the girls talk about being sexually harassed and sexually assaulted. And you know it's happening to the non-binary and the boys, but a lot of them aren't going to talk about it. Right. So I was seeing it just confused me. It just disoriented me. And then as I did this research, I saw a similarity in this complete ambivalence about the value of these lives based on how color was perceived, in public space. So then I concluded that I needed to make those black and white images as bright as I possibly could. And when Nia was still at the NAACP, I'd go and hang out with her at the mall, and I would go to the Marshalls and look in the children's section and just study the colors that were used to like attract parents clothing children at the time. And I would take those colors and I'd mix them up back at school, and I would try to take those black and white images and just make them just like nauseatingly bright, neon. To break that first response that suggests that we're talking about something that happened a long time ago. And it worked. It ended up working. That's all I got with that. We are going way over time. I don't even know what time we're supposed to end, but we should stop. Okay, yeah, see, look, David's there. We're not gonna end without you, David. We're gonna end together. David said, these conversations have been so restorative. To share the space with you all has been a tonic for me, and I hope there are ways to continue. Nia's already thinking about it. We are thinking about it. I have so much love and affection for you all and everyone in this room, and thank you, Boston Ujima Project members, for democratically voting to support this project through the Ashe Ashe Cultural Assembly Grant. This has been amazing. We've done it every month since November, and thank you for giving me a chance to close out with one.
Hey, Ma.
Yeah.
Couple of things before people drop off. One, you want to do the photo, and then two, we can just give the floor to Mary really quickly, one of our community engagement managers, to talk about our member survey. Mary,
awesome.
Hit the floor.
Hey, thank you so much. For this book club, it's been really amazing. We have a member feedback survey if folks can fill out as soon as possible. I'm gonna just drop the link in the chat, but thank y'all.
Thanks for being quick, Mary, and thank you for the reminder.
Thank you, Mary. You got to teach me how to be quick. You want a
photo, right?
Yeah, I want a photo, and I want Mary to take me under their wing and teach me how to be quick. Everyone who feels comfortable turning on your camera, please do. Now's the time. We're going to take our last group picture in this series. Thank you everyone for being here. And you know what? We have some more books. So let your local Ujima representative know that you still want a book if you don't have a hard copy, and we'll go out and mail it to you. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Oh, hold on a second. One more. I'm sorry. And Jobe's smile just got a little brighter, and I got to catch that. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone. It has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you, Boston Ujima Project, for leading.
Thank you, Tomashi Jackson, for a wonderful micropod. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomashi. This was great.
Thank you. Thank you. This was so wonderful.
Great night.
Tomashi.
Good night.
Good night.